Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons breakdown video with myself, Mike and Sloth today. Steven Bergwijn, obviously a player most of you are probably familiar with from his time at Tottenham Hotspur, now at Ajax, the captain of Ajax. He's been there for the past year and a half now, and we are now being rumoured to be interested in him, possibly more from a Tim Steidten point of view than a David Moyes point of view, but we'll get into that very shortly. So Steven Bergwijn, what does that name kind of say to you guys when that rumor first came out? You know, he's still only 26 years old. He's quite fluid in the fact that he can play across the line, playing left wing a lot this season for Ajax. Is it something that maybe excites you, or is it kind of it's better than what we've got, but there's probably better options out there?
If I'm being completely honest, my first reaction was Prem proven and a player desperate to get out of the situation he's in. That was my first kind of feeling around it. Would I say he's better than what we have at this point? Yes. Benrahma with zero confidence is not a player you can really utilize that often. Fornals has been patchy to say the least, and Cornet we just never see. So is he better than what we have in that respect? Yes. Does he come in and maybe dislodge or persuade Moyes to move Paqueta inside? I personally wouldn't say that. I think he gives us an option from the bench in that respect, but I don't think he's the player comes in as to fulfill those left wing issues we have, to then allows us to then move Paqueta into more, like a number 10, or even go into an 8 and then keep Ward-Prowse as more more forward player who rotates with Paqueta. I just don't see it as that.
Let's take a look at his stats from the previous few years and, his goals and assist return, as most people look towards that these days as like the determining factor. So this season, his numbers have actually been pretty good in the Eredivisie. 9 goals and assists from 13 games, which is pretty good return. But, you look at his time at Tottenham, when he first joined back in 1920 season, 3 goals, 1 assist from 14, 1 goal from 21, 3 goals from 25. Again, granted, these were probably a lot of substitute appearances and not, full 90-minute cameos. And, it was in a period where Tottenham were not great and had a lot of different managerial appointments in that time. So, Sloth, can we pay any attention to the fact that his Spurs spell, it wasn't good? And, is that something that maybe puts you off this signing if he's going to come back to the Prem?
It's not something that really puts me off the signing, because I think when a player isn't given a regular run in the side, you don't really get the true flavour of what they can do. So while I think it's quite easy to look at that and say, maybe he's a little bit out of his depth, I do think there's a player there. He has got the attributes to work in our system. And I do think, as Mike said, he's an upgrade on Benrahma at the moment, which is a massive thing for us.
Is that the position you see him being targeted at for left wing?
I think it will be. I think if he's not, I think it will be in that central position, but it'll only be makeshift. It'll only be until we find out more about Antonio's knock, and we get back to having an actual forward. It's just one of those signings where if I'm looking at it personally, I think, well, there's a better attacker in there in Brian Broby, who can offer you more physicality and more work rate, but also at a younger level. And yes, he struggled at Leipzig, but there's also the chance that being 6 years younger or 5 years younger, he can make that change and develop his game overall. So if I'm looking at the players in that Ajax squad that, we may potentially have to spend money on, I'd rather it be him, because he's got an eye for goal and he can play that Antonio role. But if it's a loan deal, then I think it's fair enough. It's not exactly exciting. I think you can tell by the reactions we all gave when you said, "What does that name mean to you?" It's like,
yeah. I've had more exciting reactions from you both.
Damn squib.
Yeah, and I think when you look at what we need, we all kind of got our hopes up that it would be this homegrown winger, and You look at the likes of Philogene and Clark and Rowe, who are tearing it up in the Championship, and you go, oh, yeah, that's quite exciting. And they're all around 20 years old, 21, 22. Stephen Bergwijn slightly older. He's come to the Prem and he's not lit it up, and you kind of think, oh, this is a very West Ham signing.
He's still only 26, so he's not, there's still plenty of years of football ahead of him. And it's a player that, again, he wasn't great at Spurs, but since going back to Ajax, as we mentioned before, he's been made captain. He's clearly, that type of, I don't know, type of leader on the pitch. Whether he's a good one or not, I don't know, because they were bottom of the league for a lot of the season, but they seem to have turned it around a little bit this season. He's been performing well. So when we look at the actual statistics, Mike, talk to me about him as a player, because this is kind of it doesn't compare it to the top 5 European leagues. It kind of the next 14, and again, based on the minutes played. So what does this kind of tell you about Bergwijn as a player currently, and what kind of key attributes he would bring to West Ham?
Yeah, well, what it at least indicates is that it's a player that's highly involved in, kind of creation of shots, creation of chances, who looks to push play forward. Obviously, has been doing well in terms of his shots on goal. Obviously, being in the 96th percentile for total shots means that he's a player that is not afraid to take a shot. We have that on the left-hand side in Kudus. Sometimes, obviously, those shots they're not always great. However, because of the quantity and the volume of shots, he tends to then obviously have a very good chance of scoring, or at least if you take like the example of Bowen against Tottenham, just a player taking a shot in Kudus resulted in a couple of ricochets that landed at Bowen's feet and in an advantageous position. So having players willing to take those chances, and also with a high percentage of getting those on target, is something that's great, because we see Benrahma shoot quite often. However, they tend to be wayward. And obviously, again, something that we've struggled to see with Benrahma, it's those successful take-ons, it's those progressive carries. It's someone who's going to be taking the ball and likes to take it, attack the fullback and go at the opposition. So we have it on the right-hand side. We arguably have it in the centre when Bowen's there. But on that left-hand side, we don't have it when we've got Paqueta. But obviously, Paqueta has been pulling out some incredible passes and showing his skill with Emerson. So you just kind of look at it as it will give us something, especially on a counter. It also feels a bit like a signing where, because he can play in multiple positions, it's one of those signings that we would look to go for, because it means you could, say, remove 2 players from your team and he can cover those 2 positions, across the season. So if you lost a striker, for instance, in Danny Ings, and you lose a midfielder, a left winger in Benrahma, you don't need to then replace both positions, because you can get in Bergwijn, who can play in both positions for you.
Do you think this is more of a short-term solution to what we have? Because like you mentioned, Fornal's Benrahma, they're just not currently performing. They're obviously going to be looking for moves elsewhere, especially in the summer. Cornet, another one that hasn't been used down that left-hand side. It is rumoured that we're looking at maybe a loan deal with a potential option to buy in the summer. Is that probably the best route for this type of deal in January?
I would say so.
I personally think that we should be looking at a loan. Rumours are that we are potentially interested for a buy, which could mean one of 2 things. Well, it could mean a lot of things, but it could mean that there's a deal to be done there and a bargain potentially, or it could mean that we actually just really rate the player and think he'd work in the system. Now, if our recruitment system thinks that, then look, back into the hill. It's the same sort of thing we say about Moyes sometimes, where if that is his top target, let him have the top target, because we will see what they can do. I think one of the things that we're kind of forgetting is that Fornals could potentially leave as well. So we're looking at Fornals, Cornet, and Benrahma all going, and then they all can kind of play that variety of positions. So it could mean that we also sign someone like Rowe as well and play them in that attack. But it's not a name that excites, and I think that's the problem. There is a very capable player there, but whether they apply themselves, and I think particularly this season with his issues off the field relating to the fans, which it's not I don't think it's an attitude issue in terms of him causing trouble for the side. intentionally. It's literally him. He criticised the fans, and whether that's rightful or wrongful in your eyes, Ajax fans were doing some pretty terrible things this season.
Yeah.
And he called it out. He got
wasn't it?
criticised.
He
So-
basically went on the attack because the players were constantly on attack, and he was getting asked the same questions, and he's just like, "What do you want me to say? I can't.
Yeah.
Nothing's changing. We
So
can keep going,
I think this attitude issue this season, I think that's been kind of blown out of proportion. But in terms of him coming into this side, we know he knows Alvarez, we know he knows Kudus. I think
Johnny
there is a
Heitinga as
potential.
well. Apparently he's been the main one that's pushed the deal. So there's obviously been some communication there. Obviously, Moyes really trusts Heitinga. Obviously, he was very much a trusted lieutenant at Everton. So, and now part of his staff. He's obviously backing Heitinga's, view on him as a talent. So we know with Moyes, he likes players we recommended from trusted sources. And obviously, Heitinga is probably more trusted than Stuyten still is. Stuyten has probably still got something to prove to Moyes, which I find an incredible thought process if that is the case. Bearing in mind what he's achieved at Leverkusen, etc.
The funny thing is we're talking about a player who fits the system, and none of us are really excited. Like, this is one of the few times we've actually got a player. Yeah. It's like Kudus, he fit the system.
Do you think
his numbers are really good?
He fits the system because when Kudus came in, there was obviously we already knew about his defensive work rate and how he was actually very good from a defensive point of view on statistics. Bergwijn isn't really that. Do you think Moyes would is it a difficult one, or again is it kind of a gamble in your eyes with that?
I think that's kind of, it's not disingenuous. I just think it's very harsh on him to criticize his overall performance in the side, because that Ajax team has been dog for the majority of the season, and they've only just started to turn it around. So I think to base it off this season, I think it's not really a fair reflection of the player. And we hear this a lot with players who are in relegation battles, and they're the standout, and I think he is one of them. It's, again, he's not the most exciting player in that team. He's not probably the player that I would pick, but he does fit the system. He is quick, he is direct, takes a lot of shots, and creates for others. So I think if you're looking at it purely from that scope, it's a good deal if it's a good price.
Yeah, no, definitely. Go on, Mike.
I think if you look at him as well in that, you mentioned about the defensive side. You look at it and how we've used Benrahma over years as well, in that we kind of go a bit lopsided in our defensive shape, in that will allow Benrahma maybe to sit a little bit higher when we defend, because it's then also you have that breakaway player who can then link with the centre forward. And that's kind of how we've tried to use Benrahma, because we know he's not as strong defensively. Although he's asked to come back, he's not necessarily asked to come back as far as maybe some others are. Yeah. He will be asked to work. He'll have to work. You just won't get into the team if you don't. If you're not going to do that's it. You're pretty much out on your ear, no chance whatsoever. However, I think there's always that possibility that if he was to play him left wing, then you're arguably saying Souček is going to get dropped for Paqueta to drop into that central role.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is Paqueta's going to stay on that left-hand side. So he's going to do a bit of that kind of donkey work, shall you say, and get in there and help out Emerson and kind of work those 2v1s and allow him to kind of come back, I guess, at his own pace. Again, this is possibly a bit disingenuous on him. No, I'm sure he will obviously look to get back, because he's going to want to try and prove that his time at Tottenham was maybe
I mean, as we mentioned, he's still only 26. Obviously he's had a really good turn of form since moving back to Ajax. So the player we saw 3-4 years ago at Spurs, people can change in that time, and it looks like he's found some good form. So it'd be an interesting move, and it's definitely a position we need to improve on that left hand side of the attack, because playing Paqueta there, it was more of a temporary solution that's working well, but you'd want an out-and-out left winger there to move Paqueta back centrally in the long term. So, yeah, let us know in the comments what you think about Steven Bergwijn. Would you be happy to see this happen in January? Would you like to see it on a loan or a permanent to start with? Let us know in the comments. Leave a like on the video as always. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. And lads, until the next one.
Come on, you
Come on, you
Irons.
Irons.